US national debt has just smashed past $38 trillion.
They have to find a way to contextualize that, because what does $38 trillion mean, right? To me, anything over like $10 million doesn't make sense.
There's nothing like a national emergency that'll convince the government to just spend trillions of dollars in a year.
US national debt has just smashed past $38 trillion, setting a record that nobody wants to hear about, but everyone's paying for us. Still with us in the studio, Rebekah Zjelko, DC reporter from The Blaze, and joining me tonight is Tim Rice, a recurring guest, DC bureau chief at the Daily Wire. I got it right this time. Guys, Tim, I'll start with you. 38 trillion. I mean, it's like a number that's so big that voters and people just kind of switch off when they hear it, right?
It's exactly right. It's the sort of thing where, like, when one of my reporters files a story on the debt to me, I tell them they have
Subs, please check.
Yeah, and I tell them they have to find a way to contextualize that, because what does $38 trillion mean, right? To me, anything over like $10 million doesn't make sense to those of us. But, you know, you can't put that in terms. That's not a thing that you or any of us can buy. That's not, even if you think about the military, government spending, all these things, it's so outlandish. And that's why I think, you know, as long as any of us have been talking about politics, we've heard about the national debt. This isn't going anywhere.
I think it's COVID, actually, that kind of broke everyone's kind of logic of numbers. I kind of always been the rule, if you've got anything over $1 billion, really, in an intro, people just sort of zone out. And the numbers that we were throwing around during the pandemic, on borrowing, on spending, on testing and tracing, and vaccines and warp speeds and all of that, has just kind of broken everyone's minds when it comes to dealing with these numbers, which should be absolutely terrifying, right?
There's nothing like a national emergency that'll convince the government to just spend trillions of dollars in a year. No, I mean, living in D.C. for some time now, you drive around and you see the bus stops with the national debt tracker on there. And even then, it's somehow not really clicking to the elected officials that are responsible for reining it in. It's quite fascinating.
It's not sustainable, though, is it? I mean, we're in the middle of a government shutdown here, as Congress argue about the budget. You have this annual jamboree, which we don't have in London, where you actually have to sign off the budget. But it doesn't make any difference when the numbers $38 trillion.
And to be fair, I mean, a lot of these lawmakers, they're not going to have to worry about this
none of us are going to be around when our children and our children's children.
Exactly. It's a problem that people, our age are going to have to inherit for the next several decades, and it doesn't really seem like there's any effort to actually address it at the moment. So that's inspiring.
Tim, that's the point, though, isn't it? That's a moral and ethical issue about debt, isn't it? That this isn't us that's going to have to pick up this tab. This is our generations and generations beyond who are going to be owing the Chinese and the Japanese trillions of dollars for the next 200 years.
It's exactly right, and it really makes me miss a late lamented category of person here in Washington. It makes me mad. It makes me cross, and it makes me miss the fiscal hawks.
Yeah,
right?
Where are they?
Both parties a long time ago had them. In recent history, the Republican Party had fiscal hawks. We had Paul Ryan. We had the late Senator Tom Coburn, a mentor of mine. Men who this was what they talked about. They talked about this, and they made it real. They made it real. They made Americans think about, Coburn called it the debt bomb, like the way that we were passing this problem down to future generations. And they made it they talked about it in the same conversation as they talked about entitlement reform and tax cuts to make Americans think about it as an actual tangible policy instead of an abstraction.
But it was only 7 to 10 years ago.
Right.
This was national debts were a talking point across the Atlantic.
It's not fashionable.
We had Labour's unexploded debt bombshells, posters of ginormous bombs going off. As you say, people like Ron Paul and Paul Ryan, who were making this their sort of signature hallmark. What happened? Where did they go? Did the numbers just get so crazy? Everyone went, you know what?
I mean, I think a lot of them lost re-election or decided not to seek re-election. The conversation left. The Republican Party has decided to embrace tax and spend policy in a lot of ways the same way Democrats have. Not as bad, and the policies certainly aren't as bad, but there was this move sometime in the early first Trump administration, and I think we're moving away from it. I'm actually happy. I think we're backsliding. But there was this move to say we're going to do what the left does, what the Democrats do, but we're going to do it to actually solve problems, to make America better. And if that costs money, and if that means putting off, reducing the debt, or if that means raising taxes, we're going to do it. We're going to do it to save the West, save the country, preserve the American family, instead of destroying these things. And I think that there is, you can make that argument. I'm not saying that is a bad approach to things, but I want that faction back. I want those gadflies back in the party.
Rebekah Zjelko, is it just the fact that, it is voter repellent to say, hey, austerity, cut, live within our means? It's not exactly the sexiest policy, is it?
It's not the sexiest, but there are a few still out there. Thomas Massie famously wears the pin on his shirt that has the debt counter, the debt clock, exactly. not the best of friends with the administration at the moment. Rand Paul similarly across the Capitol. They don't tend to get along with the administration at the moment. So as Tim said, not exactly fashionable.
Well, let's discuss some spending, some government spending that is costing the taxpayers nothing. Have a look at the latest pictures we're getting from the East Wing of the White House, which is no more. There it is. The East Wing has gone. £300 million now being spent on the new White House ballroom, and reports tonight that also ballroom plus some sort of interesting things beneath the ballroom, including office space and a new nuclear bunker, according to reports this evening. Now, look, guys, I'm in two minds about this one. One, you think they could have put some screens up to avoid this. Like CNN last night had they did like 4.5 hours of live streaming of the White House being demolished. Obviously, it's a bit of the White House. It was only built in the 1940s. Tim, is this a problem for Trump on the image of it? Obviously, he wants to leave his mark on the country and on the building itself, but it's not great footage, is it?
I think it's a problem. I don't think it's a problem in the way that Democrats hope. It's a problem. Neera Tanden, one of my favorite people in Washington, said on Twitter or on X the other day that Democrats should run on this in the midterms. I would like to heartily encourage Democrats to run on this in the midterms. I don't think the American people care in like practical political ways, but I think in terms of leaving a legacy, the way history is going to remember this, I don't think it's going to be the best look. I think the White House knows this. I think they're scrambling a little bit to point out that people have done renovations on the White House before. But I mean, in the briefing today, the most recent one that Caroline Leavitt could point to was Harry Truman in the 1950s. Of course, that is recent, but in political terms, it's also might as well be 500 years ago, right? That's like saying $38 trillion, right? Like, what does that mean? 50 years ago in Washington?
In the length of American history, that's basically a third of your nations. We won't go there though. Next year's going to be tough. 249 years. We'll let it go eventually. Does the president have a right to build a ballroom, to elect great big flags, to patio over the Rose Garden, to build an arc to Trump? Isn't this just going to sort of shift back to good old-fashioned, aesthetics and building stuff, right? We should be doing this.
I mean, he's literally the president. I don't know what the fuss is about. I mean, and I was in a press conference earlier in the week where the president I think they're aware of the optics, which is that you see the White House being torn down. They probably should have put up some screens or something, as you mentioned.
Unless they're just trying to send their opponents crazy, right?
They might be. They might just be trolling somebody. It's a classic. But he did say that he was really set on keeping this architectural continuity, the aesthetic continuity. That's really important to him. And he actually signed an executive order in his first term about beautifying cities and the aesthetics as a real estate developer.
Beautiful again. Yeah.
It's exactly. That's an important quality for him to have in the projects that he's invested in. And so I'm pretty hopeful. And actually, having been in many of these press conferences before, these rooms, I mean, it's a fire hazard. The amount of people that get crammed
that press briefing, which used to be a swimming pool, right? And I think it was Nixon that turned it into the swimming pool, turned it into the
bowling alley, the bowling alley, and then
So Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, she loves a prop, right? She brought along those, as Tim was saying, she brought along these pictures. Yeah, some of them are, pretty old. Do you, just finally on this before we move on, do you think are they doing enough to sort of control the narrative on this?
I think that the damage has been done. I mean, literally, they've literally torn down the facade. They're literally coming down. But I also just think that the Democrats and the media, they're just going to say whatever they're going to say. That's kind of an unavoidable problem when it comes to messaging for the administration. I think it's one that they anticipated, to be honest. I think in the long run, especially once we see how beautiful it turns out, we're going to have amazing parties. That's not going to be makeshift tents anymore.
I mean, if the White House social secretary is watching, as I'm sure they are, we'd all be like to come to the I imagine it'd be the Charlie J. Kirk ballroom, right? I mean, that's where it's heading, I suspect.
I do, and I think that Rebekah just made an incredible point, which is that this is going to be bad until things are finished being built, right? And this is, I mean, look at Trump's properties around the country, right? Everyone likes we're going to boycott the Trump hotels, we're going to boycott the restaurants. They still go. They still look good. The protests outside of Trump Tower don't make Trump Tower less of a part of the New York City skyline.
Yeah, of course it did.
When he had the Waldorf here in D.C., people still went, Republicans more than Democrats, but everyone wanted to go to the Jose Andres restaurant there. It's a fantastic spot, right? So, it looks bad, I think. I think maybe history will look back on it a little critically, but the White House is small. We need more space.
Absolutely.
We need more space for events. They certainly need more office space. Everyone's always complaining about that.
Same arguments happens in London. It's they have a word that rhymes with White House, but is slightly ruder in England for Downing Street, which is small. It's cramped. Every leader wants to go in there and redo it. My only advice on Trump property is Trump Tower. It looks good. I would avoid the food. Looks like the Democrats. Talking of the Democrats, they are eating themselves alive. Bernie Sanders and AOC are lining up for 2028. The White House is tearing itself apart. Former White House is tearing itself apart over racism claims. And America's toxic boyfriend is back, still tweeting. Gavin Newsom out in California, threatening to sue Trump. Guys, I mean, we've talked about this already. We talked about this week after week after week. It still feels like the Dems are totally punch drunk. They can't, get into gear. They have no sort of focal point, no leader. Gavin Newsom's trying to do this cringeworthy, attempt at being Trump on X. All of these kind of crazy, he's picked a fight with Joe Rogan. He's threatening to sue the president. He's trying to sort of out-Trump Trump. But the problem is you can't out-Trump Trump, can you? Because without making yourself look like an idiot.
No, I mean, I will admit that the first couple of times I saw the all-cast, I did laugh. I thought it was kind of funny at first. But to your point, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, what about anything else? Like, what do you stand for? And the fact that Democrats really tend to define themselves with Trump. They're not running on a particular set of ideas or policies, especially not ones that are popular with the American public. They're running on being not Trump. And I don't think that's going to be a very politically viable strategy for much longer.
Tim, Mandami looks like he's going to win. Is it next week, week after next, in New York? AOC is obviously becoming a sort of figure for the progressive left. You've got Bernie backing the main Democrat guy who's been exposed with a Nazi tattoo on his. The voters must be looking at these guys and being like, they deserve a long old spell in opposition, especially if they're about to tack to the left, right?
Yeah, Democrats always had a middle bench problem. They had all these elder statesmen, right?
Well,
this obviously,
right.
They still do.
Sort of oligarchs still kicking around, right?
But for a while, the Biden presidency really laid bare the problems with that. You've had, Pelosi's about to retire. The Steny Hoyer retired. That's sort of her camp of allies are all sort of retiring. Bernie's still there, but is Bernie Sanders really going to be elected president? Does anybody think this? Does anybody think Bernie Sanders is the real leader of the Democratic Party? So now you have this problem where no one was waiting in the wings to sort of be statesman-like, to actually lead the party. Everyone's been trying to get on everyone is young, right? So they were people like AOC. She's the perfect example. She entered politics in the social media age, in the Trump age. So people like Gavin Newsom have had to reorient themselves over the past 10 years to try to define themselves in opposition to Trump or to try to out-Trump Trump. The younger people are just doing this for their own personal brand and for the hopes of their future electoral prospects. And whether or not this pays off for their electoral prospects, the one thing it absolutely does is it leaves the Democratic Party without a leadership.
Well, that's the thing, as a point you make so eloquently there, is the fact that everyone's either 85 years old and gazillionaires who've been in Congress or on the Senate for decades and decades and decades, or they're these young, kind of untried Mandami figures who, whatever you think of him, he's clearly had an impressive rise. Well, he's so young. Where's in the middle you got Gavin Newsom. That's about it.
This is the downside of being the cool party, right? Because the old people were grandfathered in literally, right? They've been around forever. And sure, they marched with Dr. King, or they signed some sort of important legislation in the 70s. So they, Joe Biden, those folks, Nancy Pelosi were allowed to stay in, or they were the first to do something. The first woman, the first African American, whatever. But then, they had these people. They had Martin O'Malley. They had Howard Dean. Think about all these people, right? Yeah. They all ran for president. They got laughed out of the party. They're all cashing checks in the private sector now. When was the last time we heard from Howard Dean? When was the last time we heard from Martin O'Malley? These guys could have been the Democratic Party leadership in waiting, and they were completely drummed out.
Rebekah, can you see anyone emerging yet? It's shaping up to me from where I'm sitting right here. It looks like that it's going to be a Rubio-Vance ticket, possibly on the Republican side. They are the ones to beat right now. We're still 3 years out. Who do you see on that ticket for the Democrat side, yeah?
I pray that Kamala she gives us a throwback, just run it back for old time's sake.
Season 1 was so brilliant, right?
Let's grab a marg. Let's talk about policy. No,
the laugh. Just bring the laugh back.
I do think it's fascinating to see which candidates they're trying out and which ones are cycling out. In the California gubernatorial race, Katie Porter, a horrendous experience that is. But now they're talking about potentially replacing her with Senator Alex Padilla. They're kind of scrambling to try and plug all of these different leaks, and it's pretty dire. It
seems to me the Democrat Party is still at war with itself. It hasn't got over what happened last year. You got former White House press secretaries saying they're leaving the Democrat Party forever. You guys, you're of the Republican flavour, I suspect. Are you in any way worried about any of them?
I mean, I was reading some of the books from some of the officials that were involved in the previous administration or the previous election. You kind of see a recurring theme, which is that they're pointing the finger at everybody else.
Yeah.
It seems like
no one's fault.
No attempt to actually conduct a thorough, honest autopsy of what happened in 2024. And I feel like that's just going to bite them in the back. I mean, I don't foresee this actually being a successful strategy for them.
All right, Tim, Rebekah.